Hey there, it's Marley and welcome to a new video. Today we're going to be doing my December reading wrap-up, talking about all the books that I read in December, the last month of 2024. And because it is the end of the year and beginning of a new year, I'm also going to talk about my 2024 yearly stats as well to get a quick glance at how my year ended up. I know I talked about some of these stats in, I think, my reading survey video that I did in December, but now that the year is officially done, we can look at my definitive final stats. So I thought we could do that first before we get into the book reviews from December. All right, so I ended off 2024 with 105 books read, which is pretty on track for me. I think last year I maybe had 107. So I seem to be on track to always read at least 100 books with a few extras. So I'm happy about that. For pages read, it ended up being 37,073, give or take. Hours listened was 62. I don't listen to many audiobooks, so this is probably the most audiobooks I've ever listened to in a year. For books acquired, it was 48. So nearly 50 books were acquired this year. In terms of how many books I read each month, clearly January was my best month with 14 books. And the only other time I got close to that was in October with 12 books. I kind of suspect these are the months I read thrillers because it's just easier and quicker to get through thriller books. So that's why I think I have those numbers there. And then my lowest months were June and September with 7 books. And I want to suspect that's because I was just busier those months, that I didn't read as much with it being summer or with it being September, which is typically pretty busy for me with the film festival that I volunteer at. But otherwise, I stayed around the 8 to 10 range of books per month. In terms of format, we were really close between ebooks and physical books. I read 50 ebooks and 49 physical books, so pretty much an even split between the two. And then, as I said, a few audiobooks in there, 6 audiobooks. I'm gonna try and up my audiobook listening even more in 2025, so it should be interesting to see how many I listened to this year, but really interesting to see I have a very even split between the other two formats. In terms of audience, I definitely was reading mostly adult books this year, which obviously makes sense. I'm an adult, so 69 books I read were adult, 34 were young adult, and then just 1 new adult and 1 middle grade. In terms of genre, so fantasy came in at my number 1 genre, 27%, and then romance was 25%, following very closely. Thriller was pretty high with 19%. For next year, I've already talked about, I want to up that thriller number to hopefully be my number 1 genre. In terms of ratings, really nice to see I read so many 4-star reads. Obviously, that's a good rating. I read 40 of those, but then I only had 10 5-star reads? I thought I only had 9. Anyways, apparently I had 10 5-star reads on here. I definitely want to have more 5-star reads next year. It's nice that I still had 9 4.5 stars, and then we had 18 3.5 stars and 19 3 stars. Too many 3 stars. I don't want to be reading such middle of the road books, so hopefully more of those can go to be 5 stars next year. Still great that I didn't have that many 2 or 2.5 stars though, of course. For authors gender, which I talk about every month, I mostly read female authors, so 81% of the authors I read were female, 1% were non-binary, 17% were male. For author status, I'm not too mad about this. 55% were repeat authors, but 44% were new to me authors, which I think is still really great. I'm reading from so many new authors every month. For year published of the books that I read, not really surprising to see I mostly read new releases, so from 2023 and 2024, and then it just kind of goes down from there. I still have read quite a few from 2022, and then it just kind of goes down. Weirdly, I read 11 books from 2018, so that was kind of a higher year for some reason, but yeah, nothing too surprising with that. As I briefly talked about with my book acquisitions, apparently I spent about $660 on books, which is kind of crazy. I feel like I spent a lot less last year. I feel like it actually might have doubled this year, but I know I was treating myself a lot to books this year. And percentage read, I only read 63% of the books that I bought, which isn't horrible, I guess, to at least be reading half of them. So that's fine, I guess. So yeah, those are just some stats from the year. Now let's get into my book reviews. I'll talk about them as per usual in the order of my least favorite books leading up to my favorite books of the month. So starting out, This Summer Will Be Different by Carley Fortune. I've already discussed this book a little bit on my channel because it did end up in my worst books of the year video as well, unfortunately, because I did rate it 2.5 stars. I read this in my video where I read Indigo's best books of the year. So I'll link that vlog down below if you want to watch it. But this was one of the audiobooks I listened to. Pretty easy audiobook to get through, but just quite like boring and basic. We have a main character who lives in Toronto, and then she makes this best friend who is originally from PEI. So when she goes to visit her friend's family in PEI, she ends up kind of starting this affair with her best friend's brother. They hook up and are really attracted to each other before she finds out that it's her friend's brother. Her friend has forbidden her from dating her brother, so it's this forbidden romance. But I just found that was such a kind of basic reason for it to be forbidden and not having that high of like stakes. Basically, you're just seeing the couple hook up like every summer that she goes to visit. So for me, that's just not my personal taste in romance for it to be so focused on like the physical stuff and the hooking up so early on. Eventually you see them kind of develop a deeper connection, but it just was not an interesting romance. Clearly, I did not enjoy it and I would not recommend it. So I might honestly stay away from Carley Fortune's books from now on. I mentioned before, the only thing I really like is that she has a lot of Toronto references and Ontario references, which is where I live. So sometimes I just find that fun to read about, you know, places that I know, places that I live, but that's the only reason I would probably keep going with her books. Next up, we have 'Tis the Season for Revenge by Morgan Elizabeth. This was my book club book with my friends, and we haven't met to discuss it yet. So I don't know, maybe talking about it with them will change some of my opinions, but this was a Christmas romance that I saw was really popular, so that's all I knew about it. I didn't know how smutty it was going to be. Otherwise, I probably would not have picked this up because I'm not a huge smut reader. But this has a really fun premise where our main character is dating this guy, and it's a really toxic, like emotionally abusive relationship. That's not the fun part. That's not the fun part. But they break up and she decides she wants to get revenge on him. With her friends, they come up with this plan where she's gonna date his boss that he hates, and then she's gonna get to go with the boss to this Christmas party that her ex would never take her to because he was like ashamed of her. It was giving very much like Legally Blonde vibes. It was definitely inspired by that a little bit, where our main character is very similar to Elle, where she loves pink and she's very much a girly girl. So I thought that was really fun, and of course the setup of getting revenge on the ex was fun, but also kind of stressful because I always just hate when the main character is lying to the other main character. Like, she obviously went into the relationship under false pretenses of dating the guy. So there are definitely some stressful things about this book, but also fun. But as I was saying, my main gripe with it was how smutty it was. They were being intimate together like very early on in the book, and I found a lot of aspects of those scenes to be quite cringy and just not to my taste. So this might be a situation where like if they're more for your taste, you might be more into this book. I did end up giving it 3 stars though, which is not that bad of a rating because everything else about the book I thought was quite fun and entertaining. It's pretty short. It felt very much like a rom-com movie setup, and there were certain things about the guy character, even though I found him so annoying with certain things and so cringy, there were other things that I liked about him and about the relationship. So I just needed to rate it kind of in the middle because there were good things and there were bad. It was a whole mix. But I probably would recommend this for someone during the holiday season, but mainly if you want to read a lot of smut scenes and you don't mind that gets a little bit repetitive. Next up, we have Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I also gave this 3 stars, and I also read it in my Indigo reading blog. This is definitely my least favorite Sally Rooney book, unfortunately, so I'm not going to be recommending it. It's about these 2 brothers who are both dealing with losing their father to cancer recently. There's a big age gap between the brothers, so they've been quite disconnected throughout their whole lives, and they're quite different. So we're seeing how they're both dealing with this grief. We're seeing the relationship between the 2 of them, and mainly we're seeing the kind of romantic entanglements they both have with different women. One of the women that the older brother's dating is kind of like a sex worker, and then he's also secretly still in love with his ex-girlfriend who is ill or has some some sort of health issue and that's why they can't be together. Then the younger brother is getting involved with an older woman, and so there's an age gap romance there. So this is kind of what the book's exploring: mental health, depression, different things like that. Typical Sally Rooney, just I found it a little bit more boring than her other books and longer, and yeah, just overall not as good. Next up is What Have You Done by Shari Lapena. I also rated this 3 stars. This is a like domestic thriller book about this town that is normally pretty safe and quiet, but then this one day this farmer finds this dead girl's body in his yard, in his field. Now it's a mystery of who killed this girl, and we're seeing so many different perspectives of all these different people that knew her in the town, her friends, her family, her boyfriend, teachers, and stuff like that. Unfortunately, as you'll see in that vlog, I guessed who the killer was immediately. I found it very obvious. I really think anyone could guess it. I don't think it's just because I was being smart. Like, I think she made it too obvious, and because of that, it just ruined the reading experience for me. I still didn't rate it too poorly though, because I find Shari Lapena's writing so addicting and so readable, and so I did finish this book in one day. So because of that, you know, obviously it was a little bit fun to read still. I didn't mind reading it. I always find her books so consumable like that, but I just was really disappointed with like the actual plot and what ended up happening. Obviously, the fact that I thought it was so predictable. All right, getting into a 4-star read, we have The Prisoner's Throne by Holly Black. This is the second book in the Soul and Air duology, which is a sequel series to the Cruel Prince series, the Folk of the Air series. So this is a like fairy series, and I won't get into the first trilogy. You've probably heard of it because it's quite popular, and I really enjoyed that first trilogy. But in this duology, we're following Oak and Surin. So in the first book, we're following Surin. She is like living in the human world, even though she's fae, and then she gets wrapped back into fairy politics when this guy Oak comes along. He is a prince in the fairy world, and he kind of has a quest he needs her help with. So it's very much like a quest story. There's a romance in it. And then in this second book, we're following Oak, who is the brother of the main character in the first series. So I really liked this book, and the fact that it was from Oak's point of view, since we didn't get his point of view in the first one in the duology. So it made the series a little bit more interesting. We had even more like cameos, or not even cameos, like the main characters from the first book were very much in this book, which was fun to see Jude and Carden and all of them again. Just really recommend this series for anyone who is into fairies, politics, and romance. But yeah, it didn't overly blow me away. Like, I wouldn't give it 5 stars or anything, but a decent, solid read, 4 stars, enjoyed it, and it looks like she's going to be continuing this series, which I have mixed feelings on. Like, I obviously enjoy this world and these characters, so it makes me kind of excited for more books, but also sometimes with authors, I'm like, can you just let the world rest and like create new projects? But anyways, if you liked the original trilogy, I would recommend this duology as well. Another 4-star read I had was Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty. I read this book for my Indigo reading blog as well, since it was Indigo's #1 book of the year. This is like a contemporary or like literary fiction book about all of these people who are on this plane. This lady, this older lady, gets up in some sort of like haze. She starts going around and telling everyone when they're gonna die, like how old they're gonna be and how they're gonna die. So you're gonna be 30 and you're gonna die by cancer or something. So then we're following the aftermath of that, of all of these people. Do they believe her, and kind of how they react after these predictions are made, especially for a group of people who were told they were going to die soon. So we're seeing how they're maybe changing their behaviors based on those predictions, and if they're actually going to die when she said. But a huge part of this book is also just learning about this lady who made those predictions, starting from the beginning of her life throughout all of it to present day. Originally, I was a little bit put off by this book. I thought it was a little bit boring, slow to start. It is a bit of a longer book, but I still would overall recommend it. I think it's really worth reading if you want a story that's just really about life and death and love and all the different things you go through during life. Even the fact that I was finding the lady's life a little boring at first, by the end, everything just kind of comes together and it's very heartwarming. It definitely could be a tearjerker as well. So this is a book I would overall recommend. And the last 2 books are 5-star reads. Oh yeah, that's why I had 10 10 5-stars because I had this one last 5-star read at the very end of the year. The last book I read this year, and that was Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. I have been making my way through this series for the last couple of years. I grew up loving the movies, but I had never read the books, despite being such a reader. So it's been fun to go through and read these books. This is the second book in the series I've given the full 5 stars to. Half-Blood Prince is one of my favorite movies. I always was so interested in learning more about Voldemort's background and then getting into all the Horcruxes and stuff. So I liked this book and seeing even more flashbacks to Voldemort's life than what they could include in the movies. I finally started to like Dumbledore more in this book, but of course we know what ends up happening with him. I just think this was a really great book for the plot development, but also the characters and the romances. So yeah, obviously we don't need to discuss these books too much anymore. Everyone knows about them, but I really enjoyed this one. The last book I'm going to talk about, my favorite book of the month, was Everyone on This Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevenson. I also talked about this recently in my best books of the year video. This is the sequel to Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. It's a murder mystery series that is quite lighthearted. It's a little bit more of a cozy mystery, I would say, because it's so funny. But we have our main character, Ernest Cunningham, and he wrote this book recently about how everyone in his family's killed someone and the kind of murder mystery situation that he got into. And now he's on this kind of press tour with some other authors talking about their books and what it's like writing crime and mystery novels. They're traveling on this train together. And then there is a murder. So now a new murder mystery situation has started. Ernest has to try to solve who is killing people. But of course, he's surrounded by other people who know how to get away with murder because they all write crime murder fiction. So as I said, just super funny, super entertaining. I loved how everything came together with the plot. It was not guessable, unlike the Shari Lapena book. This is just something you could not guess, but everything comes together in a really fun way. Just really excited that this series is continuing. I need to recommend this to everyone. This is a book I'm genuinely recommending to people in my real life just all the time because I think anyone could enjoy this series. I think it's getting an adaptation too, which could be interesting. But yeah, these are all the books that I read in December and my stats for the year. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and got a couple recommendations. Hope you guys have a great new year, 2025. See you next time. Bye.